Welcome to Dead Genre Chronicles, a critical podcast on the diversity of JRPGs. Drawing from the origin of the genre to the present day, every month we play through a JRPG and we invite you to play along and send us your questions and thoughts on it. I'm Devin.
I'm Becky.
I'm Leroy.
And we don't have any jokes this episode, like collectively. I mean, if you wanted to make the joke, make the joke. I'm just,
I don't really have a joke. I've put 50 hours in Persona 5 in 2 days. That's my joke. It's me.
There literally aren't 50 hours in 2 days.
Yeah. It was like 3 days, I guess.
However, there are, if you use the dark
blur
hour.
Of days.
Excuse you.
I've been living in the dark hour.
And you used it to play Persona?
Yeah. Just as tiring as going to Tartarus.
See, the problem is the dark hour only manifests when you're playing Persona.
Yeah. Okay, so this episode is not about Persona, unlike the last episode, which was about Persona. This episode is about Skies of Arcadia, which is
about Persona.
I'll fucking smack you. Skies of Arcadia is a JRPG about sky pirates, which was originally published by SEGA on the Dreamcast and also got a port on the GameCube. Boy, oh boy, where do we want to start with this one?
Technically it was also developed by SEGA. It's the lasting remnants of the Phantasy Star team into their own company called Overworks, I think.
Ah, right.
Yeah, SEGA split up all their stuff into like 6 or 7 different companies. Some cities basically, and they made basically all the Dreamcast games you've ever heard of. And then they all kind of got sucked back into Sega by like 2003 or 4. It's weird, but This is the product of that era of odd development cycles.
So I think this was probably my idea to cover, because that's usually when things go bad.
I mean, yes, but also at one point we were thinking of having a guest on who has an interest in this game and didn't pan out. So
yeah, but my interest in this game, this is one of the first JRPGs. Well, it's one of the first JRPGs I played as a person interested in JRPGs. Like I played a bit of Disgaea 2 and Thousand Year Door, and then this, and then FF12, and the rest is history. But like, I played this game. I borrowed it from a friend in 2008, and more or less as he was handing it over, he said, "This is my favourite video game." And so I spent the entire time that I was putting 70 hours into my first playthrough bagging on him, basically, about how much I hated the game. I have to be completely honest about it, not for good reasons. Like, the reasons that I hated the game the first time I played it were, like, the most obvious cheap shot garbage that gets spewed about JRPGs.
I was about to say, because it's an RPG.
Well,
yeah,
it does have a high encounter rate. So that was a very easy way to score points. And there are other things that are irritating about it, but I didn't have anything like the background understanding to construct the kind of critique that we can construct of it now.
I would say I was still irritated by the world map encounter rate. Just completely unnecessary.
Yeah. But I basically spent... I was probably playing it for over the course of 3 weeks or so, just going full zero punctuation at this guy. And then every time it came up in conversation for the next 2 years, and we were in a band together, so we spent a lot of time in conversation. I would have a go at him for it, and I played it again during that time, and still hated playing it, but also put 40, 50 hours into it.
This is like when I made Max play Persona 3, and he never... he always makes one of the game and me for it.
But this was like a pillar of our friendship for some years, was me just yelling at Chris.
The pillar of salt.
Pretty much. Me just yelling at Chris about how bad this game was, without ever really engaging it. But equally, I've always found something fundamentally compelling about it. And I mean compelling not in the sense of a euphemism for interesting or artistically valuable, compelling in the sense of I keep wanting to think about it and experience it again. Some of which is incredibly superficial. Like I talked when we talked about Grandia about colours on the Dreamcast just looking better. And for me and my personal taste in use of colour, Skies of Arcadia is the absolute pinnacle of that in all of video games. I've never seen a video game that I liked the use of colour more, but also there's nothing critically interesting about my colour preferences. Unless you've ever had to read a website I designed, in which case I apologise.
Yeah, I'm in charge of our website for a reason.
I'm not trying to counter you, but I can just think of so many games with a better use of colour. I'm just not saying anything.
Well, no, like, I'm not saying
I get
good
it.
use of colour.
I know what you mean.
I mean what I like rather than
it's just a personal attraction.
Yeah.
I could make a really bad it's just her palette joke, and I think I just did.
You just did. Good enough. I mean, it happened.
Because taste palette and also color palette, I'm funny. I've been awake for way too long. Anyway, please continue.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of it is purely that surface of the use of color, the ship designs, particularly the Delphinus. Probably my favourite airship design in all the video games.
I don't like the Delphinus design.
Yeah, me neither.
I really like kind of the World War II battleship look. So
the Little Jack is actually one of my favourite airships, but the Delphinus is one of my least favourite airships. So that's how it broke down.
Yeah, I've had large arguments with other people about the Delphinus versus other ships in this game, but I really like the Delphinus.
I'm at a point where I'm almost every ship is better than Delphinus except for Gaussian's Hydra. That's the Delphinus but worse.
Basically, my opinion is if it wasn't helmed by Vigoro, Vigoro's ship would be the funniest goddamn thing. Because it's just, here's gun.
That's why it's helmed by Vigoro.
Yeah, I know, but I hate him
and his ship.
I love it because it's just so dumb, and if it was something that you could use, just here's gun, it's good, gun good, and you just fire it every turn because you
can't equip any cannons, you can just fire your gun.
The super cannon, turn after turn after turn.
Oh, God. Vigoro's ship is a hilarious feat of game design, as is the version of DeLoco's ship that's got a literal actual claw on an arm. As is the fact that Belize's ship clearly is just a giant dildo, which I don't know how that comes about in a Japanese game made in 2001?
2000. 1999, 2000.
Yeah, it's lewd is what I'm getting at. But, I mean, there are aesthetic things that I like about this game, but it also, and this is not entirely a strength considered in its full context, but as a subjective experience, it also leans way hard into the Saturday morning cartoon spirit. And where that spirit contains likable stuff, that commitment pays off. It's always 100% earnest about its, I guess, optimism about the human spirit, even when that optimism is completely misplaced. And as a quite optimistic person, that creates a space in which I'm very comfortable, except when it's optimistic about terrible, terrible things that it shouldn't be optimistic about, which I'm sure we'll talk about a great deal.
Yeah, that's basically the whole problem. But the central relationship is pretty wholesome between Skyphene and Aika.
Yeah, so that's one thing. With the exception of one very particular scene, which we will have to discuss, the central trio relationship is great. And it's great not just in the usual ways of JRPGs being about friendship, it's great in another way as well, which is that it never sets up any kind of competition between two romantic stories.
No, it's actually really platonic.
Well, see, that's the thing. I don't actually think it's platonic.
I do.
I think it comes from a lineage of Japanese stories that maybe you could say show don't tell, but diegetically it's platonic.
I don't agree, obviously. And there isn't much evidence because the game never spends that much time on the relationship qua relationship. But
it is Saturday morning cartoon quote unquote romance in the way that Ash Ketchum got kissed by a girl at the end of a season of Pokemon, and that happened and people freaked out because oh my god, Ash got kissed. And that's all it amounted to me. It was just a flake of something, but not actually anything substantial. I'm fine with it being 3 platonic friendships. And I'm a sucker for platonic friendships between characters of different genders, and people constantly turn them into romantic relationships, and I don't like that.
I mean, there's obviously undercurrent of budding romance, but it's not a love triangle either, but between the 3 characters. But I mean, it seemed to me just set it's platonic for now, just because they're focused on adventuring, living their life right now.
Yeah, well, also because they're young.
Yeah, because they're young.
But, like...
It doesn't step into that uncanny valley.
Yeah, but, like... So, I guess what I want to say is I think it's very easy to write... It's not just that it's a very wholesome relationship. It's the kind of thing that would be very easy to write very wholesome fanfic about.
Yeah.
Like, the promise of what happens after the end of this story, when they go out and have more adventures... I think
I'm gonna just say this game doesn't do abstraction well. Like, you literally explored the entire world. Like, there is nothing left for them to have adventures on. So I'm just gonna shoot that down right now.
But I mean, that's I think that's what Becky means. Their adventures are now getting to know each other instead of getting to know the world.
Yeah, like it's like it's going to be a different kind of adventure.
I would have liked literally any of that in the game because there's fuck all for any of that. And I'm fucking bored out of my skull for fucking 40 hours.
I mean, there's like, you don't get any substantial maybe about the characters, but there is emphasis on like actual care between the characters. Like, they make up for each other's weaknesses. They don't condescend or neg each other, besides some of Vice's lines. And they're like always there for each other. They'll probably die for each other. Like, you get that a lot in RPGs, but I don't get the sense always in RPG parties that they're like actually friends. It's like they're united in purpose and they're united in ideology, but they're not like, I actually care for all these people necessarily, like I felt in Skies of Arcadia.
I just felt like Fina kind of just imprinted on the first admittedly good pair of people she met, and not much past that in terms of like
that is
trust.
True. Fina hasn't had
like
that much
fucking
experience.
Ramirez imprinted on fucking Galcian. Like, that's literally the same thing.
They came from like incredibly crypto-Buddhist society where they couldn't do anything, so that's like why. But
crypto-Buddhist is a new one.
I don't know what else it is. There's a pseudo-unlike critique of Buddhism in Skies of Arcadia, which I can't really talk about, but it's there.
You think so? I mean, I passed the Sylvite civilization as just the arch European rationalists, really.
They keep talking about coming from nothing and going to nothing, that's a fundamental element of Buddhism.
I guess, yeah, okay.
There is contention with like the Meiji Restoration with how Buddhism was only used by the rich for the aims of the rich to like oppress the poor. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, I can't read that much into it because I don't know a lot about Japanese history, but I felt like there is a little bit there. But there's just too many things in Skies of Arcadia too. There's just too many parodied, stereotyped cultures happening, and Buddhism's one of them.
Yeah, like its relationship to like actual history and where the iconography of fantasy comes from is the central problem, really. I mean, that's some thoughts about why I'm drawn to this game, and I keep getting drawn back to this game. Where do we want to start on what's wrong with it?
Oh my gosh.
Well, it's a good thing we started early, because this is going to be a 7-hour podcast.
Is that it? We have 15 minutes on what's good about it?
Yeah.
I have a couple of things that I'll come back to.
Okay. I mean, I like it spatially and aesthetically, but I couldn't like put any energy into analyzing it because the diegesis of the story, everything about the narrative just kind of pissed me off, so I couldn't I felt like the parts going to the hole wasn't a hole I really cared about.
So the spaces of the game are good video game spaces, I think, most of the time.
There's an interesting verticality to them, like they're more influenced by 3D platformers of the era than what you'd think JRPG design would be when they're interesting. When they're not interesting, you just get like corridors. It's like a first-person game in third person, and I got turned off by half the dungeons.
Yeah, especially where the camera starts clipping on walls. Like the walls are, I don't know. Like, it's a weird thing to say, but the walls are really hard relative to the camera when they're close in.
It's really boxy design too, just like squares.
Yeah. Not to mention with how the camera actually controls. You have to basically stop moving in order to rotate the camera past you. Like,
yeah.
the wall has, like, rubber on it, gripping the camera so it can't move past, unless you stop moving, and it's just like, okay, stop moving. Now I can turn the camera right and see, oh yeah, there's a chest there.
It's because, I think, most times because the camera's trying to do a dynamic angle, but it doesn't let you change it unless you stop moving, then it centers on Vice instead, which is just weird.
Yeah.
I got very good at kind of wedging the camera into corners as I was going round them. Because the walls are so obstructive. They will catch the camera in place and point it where you want it to go.
I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting, maybe, I don't know what word to use, but there's like the portrayal of technology in this game is pretty interesting to me, but I just can't get anything positive out of it.
Yeah, that's certainly true. But like, just like the spaces in terms of, I guess the raw architectural feel of them they're well executed, and they have this verticality, which is sometimes quite refreshing. But
they're well executed, but they're also, here's the pyramid dungeon, then you go to the ice palace.
Yeah. I mean, what I was going to say is that they're semantically empty.
Yeah,
there's no interesting semiotics to them at all. There's no like, oh, this the way this space is arranged communicates something. It's just, here's a space and it looks good.
I would even kind of say what the result of it, or like the lineage that led to this kind of, here's the water level. It's like a dying gasp of an old kind of approach to game design, but with every single possible like production technique they could do at the time. It was like, it's completely modern, but with an attitude of the oldest games.
It just reminds me of fucking like a Soul Blazer or Terranigma.
Well, I was actually thinking it's like Chrono Trigger-esque. The stuff that makes Skies unique, like they're like rooted in its time, and there's nothing else like Skies, but all those things are going toward making a really rote and entitled video game story.
Yeah,
I can see that. I mean, I also like, in terms of the roteness of it, I got a lot of Ni no Kuni out of it.
Yeah, I think Ni no Kuni's worse executed, but for me it was more charming. Skies was like kind of started getting like dead to me.
I think some of that's going to turn on how the gameplay works, because this is very much more a me game than a you game.
I mean, it is definitely how long battles started to take. I was just like going out of my mind.
Yeah, I legitimately was losing track of how many battles had passed, or like turns had passed in a battle.
Dude, there are battles.
I turned away for like a full minute and a half, and the same turn was still genuinely going.
Yeah, there's battles where it's straight up, I didn't even know what the boss did anymore because I was just on Twitter, not even looking. I was like, I don't know what happened that turn.
Yeah, it literally. Like, I was just like listening to like podcasts and shit because like, oh, great. All these 8 or 9 enemies need to take their turn. I guess I'll listen to this fucking podcast in the meantime.
It's really long. It's like as long as Wild Arms 1's animations for basic stuff. Like, I'm like barely okay with the really long, here's my super move animation, but the attack in Skies of Arcadia takes as long as other games as like cast time. And it's just like, oh.
Yeah, it's basically Persona pre-PSP version. And you just did that. So
yeah, I did just do that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I think that's an area where I've got a real advantage from having played it before, because I knew how to, like, I knew the most aggressive, the fastest strategies.
Oh yeah, once I hit the 40-50 hour mark, I was like, I know how I could have done this in 30 hours, but it's too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, I basically beat it in 38 hours, quote unquote beat it, because I cheated at the end and then my cheats crashed the game, but I was in the final boss and was going to beat him anyway, so yeah.
Like, if I used all my Moonberries and Ike at the very beginning, I could get through the game like 2 times faster, probably.
Yeah. The other thing to do is give all your speed, your permanent speed boost items to Ika, so that her sweepers go off at the start of the turn.
I was already doing that because Ika doesn't really do anything else but go first, but yeah.
Man, this combat system is a mess.
I don't like it.
So I feel like what happened is that they were aiming for something like the very polished and flat-out player-friendly approach of the later Final Fantasy games. It's marketing itself in that way.
I think SP system, even the way they implemented it, it's more like limit breaks than it is like other games' energy systems.
Yeah, well, it's like limit breaks in FF8, really, where they're very, very easy to get and you have a very predictable access to them. But like the encounter design, there's a huge amount of random fluctuation in what the encounters are like, in terms of number of enemies encountered, risks there might be. So there are loads of enemies that have target all instant death moves.
Or just eat target one, and there's a lot of them in the same encounter.
Yeah, which is unconscionable design, but it's it's in a way it's very old school, because it's heavy on the randomness side, the capriciousness side. But to compensate for that, they have this SP system that gives you a free nuke every turn from like 15 hours into the game. So it's like they've tried to achieve the player friendliness of a Final Fantasy by just raising the power of your party to a level where most of the random fluctuations just completely drop out of the equation, because you can nuke them every turn.
For being like accessible, it's also like I think it's not, because if this was your first JRPG, I think you get hardwalled somewhere, because the difficulty of Skies of Arcadia is just buying a lot of items, and they give you enough money to do that. But if you don't have the healing items on hand, there's some boss fights I probably just wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, it's fucking baffling it was when I was a new player. My wall was the first Gygas fight.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any ship heal items, and there's 2 ship battles in a row.
When I saw items, I bought them, because I noticed how the curve worked. And I needed them in the early game, definitely. Later, they kind of give you a lot.
Yeah. Basically, okay, so this battle system works on the SP, which regenerates every turn, and also there's MP. We have a question about this from Sam. From looking into the magic system in this game, it seemed a bit strange. How is it in practice? And how does it compare to others? I'd like to explain this. Basically, you have MP. That's normal. What's not normal is that every spell cast costs 1 MP. It's basically spell slots more than anything, and you can restore them fairly easily. Even early on, you can buy a lot of magic point restoratives, but they only restore 1 at a time until later in the game. You learn magic by having your weapon equipped with different elements, and then you get elemental experience, and it's kind of a wonky system. I don't know. The magic in this game is kind of underwhelming.
The problem is, like, magic doesn't scale very well, doesn't do that much damage, and you can't buff it like you can your special attacks. I think because most magic's like its utility or being able to heal. If it was divorced from the SP cost and just like had mana cost, it would have been like sensible. You could actually use it.
That's literally what Trails does. So like
I ended up using magic boxes a lot because I couldn't. I never had the SP.
The thing that magic is useful for through most of the game is buffing, particularly buffing damage on your main attackers, and like that's all you'll use it for, because in addition to the magic system, there's also the spirit system, which is like every party member generates a certain amount of spirit per turn. That goes into a common pool, and every spell you use and every S move that you use requires a certain amount of spirit. It requires you to have a certain amount of spirit at the start of the turn that you enter the command. And you're always going to want to spend on S moves rather than spells, because S moves are just better. For every spell, there's an S move that does similar but better. And the upshot of it is your combat experiences are largely going to be shaped by how much spirit you're generating and what S moves that makes available to you every turn. I was going somewhere with this and I've forgotten. I've lost the thread. Sorry.
I'm going to hijack this train of thought. The scaling for how much SP you generate is fucked up and wrong.
This is true.
Okay, so each character, when they hit certain levels, they generate 1 more SP per round. This maxes out at 20 per turn at level 99. I never got past level 50 when I beat the game, and at that point, even if all of my characters were level 50, I think Vice would have been the only one generating 4 SP a turn. The rest would be generating 3. And it's this completely arbitrary table of levels that each character needs to be to level up their SP generation. And it's all backloaded on those last 50 levels, which no one's ever going to use. Like, only the hardcore people are going to play that much. And it's super not useful to most people. And when I started, I thought it was like, okay, when you're like level 1 through 10, you get 1, 11 through 20, you get 2, and it turned out to not be that, and I kind of wish it was that, because that would still round out to about the same at the end of the game, but it would also just make things a lot simpler and open up some options.
Other band-aids would be to have SP restoring items or have focus
there are very rare
besides
items.
the one elixir tier all your SP back item.
Yeah.
Or the other one would be to have it so focus does more than just 1 turn's worth of SP, like 2 turns.
Yeah.
But
focus is powerful enough, I think.
I do not think having to pass everyone's turn so you can do something the next turn is really it's not very compelling design.
Yeah. Like, okay, Drachma has a move that makes him charge twice the spirit next turn.
It costs 0.
And it costs 0. Like, if Focus just did that would be nice. If you get 2x, because, like, the numbers are always so small through the entirety of the game.
The problem is it took me like 6 or 7 of my best attacks to beat the last boss, which that is like
4 turns of charging every time.
Yeah.
Because you also need to keep your damage buffs up, or your damage reduction buff up, which is an S move, which costs SP that you have to then recoup.
You see, I didn't actually do that. I just rezzed people who died.
I mean, this isn't really controversial, but it's just how I feel. If a fight's going to last that long, but there's pretty much no threat of me losing, I think it shouldn't last that long. It should be slower.
No,
I know it'd be frustrating to have a fight that lasts a long time. There's a random chance of you dying, but that's the only way you can justify having a fight that lasts a long time, because otherwise it just lasts a long time for nothing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that the fights at the end of the game aren't too long. They are fucking ridiculous.
I took out Zealous in like fucking 15 minutes. Which is still too long, because ship battles suck.
I don't even remember how long I took out Zealous. It took me a while.
It's not as bad as Persona 1's final boss.
No.
But
Persona 1's final boss can at least just RNG kill you.
Yeah.
I think Last Remnant is just better than this game in general, but Last Remnant had a better example of this really long fight you can just randomly lose, and that's why it's really long.
Yeah. I can agree with that. Mr. War God is a pain in the ass.
The problem with the Sky's final boss sequence is that it's like there are a bunch of bosses. If you include like the last, not just the Zealous fight, but also the last kind of ship battle sequence with Galcian.
Yeah,
like the Hydra is unforgivable, and any system that just stacks on the HP at the end like that is bad.
Yeah, but like I didn't have trouble with that. Like that was I couldn't cheat on ship battles because like the cheats I was using just did not work in ship battles. So I fought those things legit, and basically all I did was like I got random drops from previous bosses, so I had less trouble, and I was also buffing with attack up wax.
Yeah, but so the Apple Wax gives you more attack than eponymous. So if you use that, you'll sweep like everything in the game.
Yeah, like I literally did 90k damage in a turn to a boss that had 240k.
I cleared the Hydra pretty fast. I was frustrated in Zealous because the way debuffs, there's only one debuff, it's Drillin'. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
But if the debuff's on you, you can't buff. It'll miss. But if you're buffed, the debuff will always hit still. It'll just overwrite.
Yeah,
it's
that's
just like,
fucking bites.
No, the debuff doesn't overwrite.
Yes, it does. It will.
I'm gonna find you footage of it not overwriting.
It can miss. The debuff can always miss. There's a chance of missing. But if someone's buffed, they can be debuffed. If they're debuffed, they can't be buffed.
Yeah, there's a priority. And it's not good.
It prioritizes, instead of prioritizing the player or making it so they override each other, which makes more sense to me, it just gives the enemy an advantage. And I'm just like, they already have 100 million HP. But
yeah. The second part of Sam's question is it too broad to ask about the value of magic systems in general for JRPGs? And yes, because largely magic systems are a subset of skill systems, and if they're not, they are actually, but either they're a subset or alternative to a skill system. Yeah, it's a little broad.
I mean, it depends what you mean by magic system, right? If you mean like just anything other than a basic I poke it with my sword, it pokes me with its sword, then you've got to have something like that, right? You've got to have...
I'd define that as a skill system, though.
I could say magic does two things. It's world building. It textures the world, which in Skies of Arcadia it doesn't do very much. And magic also maybe influences your perceptions of a character's psychology. I lifted that from Video Game King in his new essay. But so magic is like maybe an expression of characters, which in Skies everyone has the same pool of magic, so it's like an equalizer, but it's still not that interesting.
Yeah, the only thing that like you could even relate that to is maybe that like certain bosses have certain elements of fucking magic, but they also have elements that are not that usually.
Everyone uses about the same magic, but it's like uncommented on in the world. Why everyone has access to magic and they use it all the time, but it doesn't seem like an everyday part of life until you're fighting, so it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Skies makes a very bad example with which to approach this particular question, I think. There are games that do a better job of kind of making magic a part of what's going on, but also I think it can be very clumsy, and you can end up with, like, the Dragon Age situation, where it's just, like, Dragon Age, the mages, as I understand it, are basically the X-Men, who are basically a really, really clumsy, like, AIDS metaphor. So it's 2 levels removed from something that was already terrible to begin with.
God, the fuck... I'm not gonna start on the fucking Dragon Age mages. I've recently played through Dragon Age 1 and 2 and am working on Inquisition because I hate myself and paid $20 for it already. And I have opinions on how that game thinks mages or fucking human beings act. Holy shit. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, my Dragon Age knowledge is mostly mediated through your recent playthroughs, so...
yeah.
I mean, there are games that engage with, like, how magic comes to be in the world, and like, Tales of Vesperia is one, where they kind of investigate that a bit, and one of the characters is a scientist.
Final Fantasy 13 is a good example, too. Sorry, cut you off. I was just excited thinking about it.
Also, Tales of Xillia. Like, the entire reason the schism in Xillia happened is because one kind of people could do magic, which is just like, okay, that makes sense. That would probably cause some problems.
How magic affects the world is, like, a really, like, it's, like, ancient or traditional fantasy world building, like, question, too.
Yeah, but, like...
Oh, no, I'm just saying in general.
Skies doesn't even fucking comment on it.
No, it doesn't
just
bother.
Yeah, fucking magic. I don't know.
Skies actually makes magic, in a factual lore sense, a big part of the world, right? Everything's themed around the moons, and the moons are the kinds of magic, and it permeates the world design, and it accomplishes nothing by it.
Yeah.
It just makes everything color-coded.
It's just like an excuse to why you can use magic, basically.
Yeah. I think one kind of variant on Sam's question would be to ask, well, why is the element system such a trope? It's not always elements per se, and it's certainly not always the four classic Greek elements, but it's always a variation of that theme. Why do we have kinds of magic, every one of which has a damage spell which is more effective against some kinds of magic and less effective against others? Why is that structure so common? Because it goes back before video games, and like it plays some obvious roles in adding a level of sometimes superficial complexity. But why does nearly every JRPG have a magic system that works like that? Which I don't know if I have an answer for, but I think that's maybe the...
I mean, my lazy... I never really thought about it, but my lazy think PC answer would be... We think of things in terms of strengths and weaknesses in a competitive sense, so this is good at that, and this beats that. It's like the capitalist framework would lead us to believe these skills are better than those skills at this certain thing.
Well, except that, I mean, if it was a pure capitalist framework, there'd be one that was the best, and then there'd be a hierarchy.
Some games have that, like SMT.
Yeah, sure, but I think...
Actually, Silver does that in this, because it's...
The elites have access to Silver, and it instantly kills you.
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
But I mean, the platonic ideal of this system is a balanced system, right? It's a round robin, or they're all paired or something. Which again, it's the way Final Fantasy does it, which is why it's so dominant in our understanding.
Unless you don't think about Ultima, which should be the one above all.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the elemental event damage chart that I put together so I could have quick reference for how this game's shitty systems work, and it's not even symmetrical at all. It's all lopsided, and it just doesn't. If you don't have a clue what you're attacking, just hit it with Silver, because Silver does normal stuff to everything except for Yellow, which it does better against. It's clearly superior.
I just kept on whichever magic I was leveling, which made my text not do a lot of damage most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I think it might be an interesting exercise to try to think about how you make a game, a JRPG, that has a significant role for a magic system work without an oppositional magic system, where there's only one type of magic damage, or even there's only one type of damage and magic does it just as well as physical. What do you lose besides the range of spells that you can have? Is it just that these elemental systems are there so that you've got more damage spells?
I think it's just convenient and a fast way to have more options and have an elusive strategy.
Isn't that what Paper Mario did? Isn't Paper Mario just you have physical and you have magic and they both just do damage? I think there isn't really there's no difference between physical and magic, though. I mean, there's star power and shit.
Yeah, but if they have a defense buff, they'll just take less damage.
Yeah, and I think Paper Mario, some different moves have different effects, but it's always in terms of a status effect.
Yeah.
Or rules that it's breaking.
Yeah.
There's true damage attacks too and stuff. There's just a lot of things.
You're dead right that Paper Mario is an example of that kind of that particular simplification. I think Paper Mario uses it very well, but it also doesn't make any kind of narrative thing of it.
Yeah.
So, ship battles.
we have questions about these, so I'm going to fire these up.
Actually, I was like to talk about ship battles. I actually want to talk about the story because
okay,
they got like worse as the story progressed for me, and some of it's just like because story battles are mostly they live and die on the production values and just getting into these really elaborate fights that are close to scripted. They're mostly scripted.
Yeah.
So how invested you are in the fiction is how good they're going to be.
Like, it is a weird thing where basically a ship battle is a small choose-your-own-adventure. Like, it's not so much... The actual kind of moment-to-moment combat barely matters. You choose the right options when the dialogue prompts come up, and they're always like a binary choice anyway. And when you route your way through the flowchart to the right step, then you get the super move in.
I personally, I like the Little Jack. I like the humility of the ship and all, like beating these giant opponents against all odds. Like there's a feeling of outmaneuvering or outsmarting them, because it's like you're winning because like you have more to lose basically, and more to lose than these like the Aegis or the Armada, and you can't afford to lose. And so like the themes of you should never give up when you're in this little teeny scrappy ship that shouldn't win, I felt like that was really fun and compelling. And then when you get the Delphinus, which is the most high-tech, powerful ship of all time, I didn't really feel really excited when I won, because I was like, I have the Moonstone cannon. I'm supposed to win this fight. I will win every fight.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at, but also like a shift happens when you get the Delphinus, and suddenly the game introduces fleet battles. So once you get the Delphinus, the next big ship battle sequence is Gregorio at Esperanza, where you fight 3 ships in a row, and that's you in one ship taking on a whole value in fleet.
Even with those odds, I just still felt like a bully, because you kind of one-shot most of the ships in that fight.
Yeah, I mean, then it sets up for Yafutoma, where the Delphinus becomes the linchpin of the scrappy underdog fleet beating the Valuans.
Yeah. And
the same thing then happens again at the end of the game. And this is a superficial thing. It's not a deep point, and I think if you go into the deep politics of it, it's terrible. But like, I really like those ship battle sequences, because like it's a part of World War II history that I find interesting. And it's not even really World War II history, because the actual big ship battles in World War II were not fleet battles at all. There's just this kind of hagiography around them, really, that paints them in that light. As you look back through history, there are very few kind of fleet-to-fleet naval battles with anything like a modern battleship, because they're pointless dick-measuring contests for empires, really.
I mean, back to my previous point, I think it's transparent what the Delphinus and the Crescent Island represent to the player, and it's just accumulation and being rewarded for the RPG time you put in.
Yeah, definitely.
So, you get all these things because you're going to feel important. And I don't like that when there's no drawback or there's nothing being critiqued. I'm just given these cool toys to blow up other ships, and it feels like that's like the ugliest and base impulse of what an RPG can do. It's like when you see these numbers, it's like what you feel compelled to do if you don't want to think about it.
Yeah. No, like, this game's realization of a basic RPG structure is so... earnestness is the characteristic of this game, and it is completely earnest about the basics of the JRPG structure, just as it is about everything else. And that's bad, because that structure is kind of not good.
Well, then there's the insistence that a lot of things Vice does, like 17, 15, whatever, he does so many things that have never done before by anyone else, and they keep insisting that, and I just can't read that as anything other than player pandering when it just keeps happening.
Yeah, this is very much a game where you get to play the good boy.
The good special boy.
Yeah. You're going to do everything. This world exists purely for you, and... yeah. Like
the peak of that, or just the peak of that when you're heading in to fight the Delphinus, you can pick an option where you can just yell, "It's time to make history." And I was just like, oh my god.
I think the thing that was like, what really was like, you go to the east and then you get told by Beleza that she's just like, oh yeah, we came in from Ixataka, which is the west of the world, and apparently, even though she knew to come west to get to Yafutoma, you're the one who discovers that the world is round.
Yeah, you get credited with flying around the world, even though people have gone to Yafutoma before in history.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even immediately, like the fucking
Blaze just did.
But that one is just a larger scale version of what happens when you go to Ixataka the first time, which is this long lost, far distant
long lost racism. Sorry.
Across the impassable southern seas, and you get there, and the Valiants have been there for ages because they came in from the place where this literally borders Valua.
Yeah.
There's an open passageway.
They had to put a gate on there.
I mean, it could be that Valua is just like propaganding the history, but still.
It's, like this game's grasp of geography and history, just even as basic mechanisms, never mind the politics of it, is terrible.
Yeah.
But that's because it's doing the cartoon thing.
With how the Yafutomans are just like mostly Japanese. They're kind of a weird cultural mix though too, but they're mostly Japanese, so it actually
I think it's important to be careful. I think they're mostly Chinese.
Really?
Because I mean, they have a Great Wall.
I saw the Great Wall. I was thinking really hard on this too, but
yeah, the styles are mostly Chinese. Like it's Shaolin monks, not Zen monks that are invoked by the Tenko, and the more racist aspects of that portrayal.
That's the thing. Like, my first impulse was that it was Chinese, but the way the leadership worked, I started getting confused.
Well, I mean, there's going to be an ambiguity there because the people making this are no better experts in the history of their own part of the world, which obviously includes China, than they are in the history of Europe.
Well, for my point, it doesn't matter what racism's over there. There's a racism over there, and it's characterized that Vice and the Valuans are Westerners. So, like, the game glorifies, like, explorers as Westerners who explored the world. That's self-evidently, like, oh my god, problematic.
Well, I think it's actually deeper than that, right? Because so the whole pitch of the game, it's not actually a game about being pirates, because if it was a game about being pirates, you'd have to do some piracy.
If it was a game about being pirates, I would have had fun, sorry.
Quite. But it would have been a very different game. So the way it leans into that vague idea of the age of piracy is making you an explorer, making you a Cortez or a Columbus figure. And it doesn't understand. It's not made by people who have a sophisticated understanding of what European imperialism was. But you can't replicate that without importing the colonialism that goes with it. Right? You can't tell a story about exploration and discovery of new lands and new cultures without positing an imperialist relationship between the discoverers and the discovered.
Yeah.
So the racism of the game, and it's monumentally racist, is intrinsic to its structure. Like, and this is why I think it's important to be clear about Yafutoma being more a Chinese culture than a Japanese culture, because there's a huge amount of anti-Chinese racism in Japan. Yeah. And I think that the racist portrayal of... there are two levels on which the racist portrayal of the Yafutomans operate. One is particularly with the evil Yafutomans, Kangen and the son, whose name I forget. Like, they are very clear racist caricatures of something, but it's an aesthetic racism.
They actually remind me of what's his name? Is it Fu Manchu? I'm not sure.
Yeah. I see.
Really old racist Chinese villain that was popular in Britain.
Yeah,
in literature.
But there's also the racism of the political relationship of who's understood as advanced and sophisticated and cultured, and who's understood as backwards in some way. And all the cultures you meet that aren't the explicitly European one are portrayed as vulnerable through some sort of naivety. It's not just that they are less technologically well equipped. Their vulnerability is partly naivety. It's partly a lack of social or intellectual sophistication that renders them vulnerable. Like,
in Nasser, it goes to a point of condensation where the leader is portrayed as actually inept and overconfident.
Yes. Yeah,
that was where I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yes, the Nas Sultan, as he is called, the leader of the vaguely Arabic Middle Eastern culture, because we can't just call him Sultan, but we have to have something that sounds like Sultan so everybody gets the reference. But it's like, and in that you see something general about how we understand fantasy, because this is the most standard conventional fantasy story you could tell in a lot of ways. And it depends utterly on a supremacy, a particular Eurocentric supremacy, even though it is made not by European people, by people who may well have a substantial degree of animus towards Europe, in some sense. So the racism of the game is intrinsic to it. What's interesting is it also ventures into other areas of marginalization, where it's, it didn't have to. There didn't have to be a sexual assault scene in this game. And it didn't have to be handled in the way it is. There didn't have to be the really grotesque, fat-shamey character, Gordo the pirate. They're just in there because somebody thought, okay, we can get some laughs this way.
Yeah, I was going to say they're just like really lazy devices.
Yeah, and that's an important point about how fantasy operates generally, because some of the features of fantasy, you can write absolutely a genre fantasy story where you have a genuinely strong and interesting and deep female lead character, right? You can write fat characters who are good. I would argue that Drachma is that in this. Yeah, like he's a fat character. He doesn't really fall into any of the tropes that I'm aware of around fat characters. He does have. I mean, the
only one is that he's the big, strong, kind of the rock character.
Yeah, I wouldn't characterize him as. I see him more as an old man more than a fat character.
There's not a lot of old men or fat characters, so I actually love Drachma. He's actually one of my favorite characters in Skies.
Yeah. I mean, fatness is a visual appearance thing. We can't say, well, this character looks fat but isn't a fat character. He's not being characterized as a fat character, but the characterization of fat character is what is harmful, and he just doesn't have those features that stress the negative connotations of his body shape.
The thing is, I don't read him as, maybe I just looked at him wrong, but I didn't read him as fat. I read him as like an old burly sailor dude.
No, I went and looked at his character model. He's definitely fat.
This is like a esoteric, well, not really that esoteric. It's like a quick person. He's fat like in Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Like it's still an uncommon body shape, but it's also not one that's not really looked down upon necessarily. At least in men. In men, it's okay to have that body shape.
Yeah.
But he still doesn't fall into, he's not made fun of for being old or fat, at least.
Yeah.
And the point is that some of the ways in which this game participates in marginalization or recreates, propagates marginalization are completely superficial to it. They could be removed without loss. Some of them are fundamental to its structure, and it's important to recognize that it's the race element that is the most fundamental. And I think that is a general pattern across fantasy, as we understand the genre as it is produced en masse in our culture and other cultures. Some of the ways in which fantasy as a genre has contributed to marginalization are contingent, they're laziness, they're unnecessary, and some of them you can't have what we understand as fantasy without this racist underpinning. So we have to think again about what fantasy is.
Yeah, change the understanding of fantasy. Yeah, basically.
There are definitely people doing that work, and I don't want to negate their efforts.
I just read the Book of Three recently, which is old, well-known fantasy, and I wasn't surprised when the enemies were just every weird culture from the southern lands, because of course that's what was going to be the bad guys.
I mean, even fantasy that I really genuinely love and that I think is written with a genuine humanistic spirit and an understanding of marginalization, there are racially coded tropes in it. And they're inescapable when it's by white authors. So, yeah, there's something revealing about the way Skies does fantasy.
I actually have more structural problem. Sure, because mine's long.
And I just want to say, Proxy asked, given the smattering of problematic racial content in the game, do you believe that said content could be completely cut from another version of the game to get the same exact experience? I think that's a clear no from the last 7.5 minutes of Becky talking.
You'd have to make a sequel and rethink all of it. If you're going to restore it, it would just look like you just put a coat of paint over the racism. It'd still be the racism. You just know it's there.
Yeah, like you can't. Racism is not about intrinsic properties of populations. It's about relationships between populations, and this game relies on that relationship. The discoverer discovered, effectively, and that is what you can't take out of the game. So you could reskin all the characters so that all the Valuans are black and all the Ixatakans are white, but it would not render the game innocuous. And I don't think there's anything you could do to render the game innocuous. What a pirate-themed steampunky game that isn't racist looks like. I mean, there's a case for Tales of Berseria.
Yeah.
I was going to say, is there one? It's just coming from, like, racist history, but I didn't know.
Like, Berseria gets a lot closer to it, because it's got a better sense of how Eurocentric culture works. But I think it still occasionally strays into something a little bit, like there are some cultures that are clearly a little bit Pacific Islander, and there's an undercurrent that goes along with that, because it can't not invoke the history of the relationship of Europe and the West to the Pacific Islands. But I know it's conceivable. It's probably not our place. It's certainly not my place as a white fantasy author to deal with that. And one of the reasons that I stopped writing fiction was that I couldn't solve this. I couldn't see a way for me to solve this problem in my own writing. Anyway, Leroy, you had a...
So I knew we would get to the racism. So I prepared a big long thing about Sky's portrayal of war. And this isn't separate from the racism, but I'm not going to talk about it basically because you can understand how they interact. But like the death count in Skies of Arcadia is massive. It is staggering despite how happy-go-lucky the game is. And I think that's supposed to set the stakes, but the player or Vice's company, they never lose anything. Their base gets destroyed, but it doesn't even take an hour before the base comes back. While tons and tons of faceless people lose everything, and so when the characters are safe in the Delphinus, I feel there's a feeling like everything's at stake except these characters' lives. And so Sky is really jubilant and happy about this, and I don't think it stops becoming a suitable tone when the nukes come out, right? That we're still like, well, we're not going to give up. We're just going to do our best. And like, it's guys to know their choice, right? They're back to this corner. So I remember a good argument by John Brindle when he was writing about Battlefield 1. He said that there's no, like, having proper respect of war is a can of worms, because if you treat war like a church procession, that's really problematic. But if you treat it like play, that's also problematic. So I'm just going with my gut. But I think if Skies wanted to be, like, continue being playful and have this thing where the villains are obviously bad with no given reason, and the heroes win because of course they win, then less innocent people should have died. Because I never felt anyone involved in the story was affected by the stakes in the same way people you didn't know were. So I felt like people were treated as collateral and props. And this is problematic because that's how modern warfare goes down. This is kind of a modern problem that retroactively applies to Skies, but things like drone warfare encourage you not to feel connected to the collateral and the victims. They're supposed to put it out of the minds of civilians, and that's why we don't have media coverage of the wars America gets into anymore that much. And so when Nasser gets attacked and it's burned down, Vice didn't really care, and actually it's in the text that Nasser actually deserved to get burned down because of their hubris. And I mean, that's super fucked up. And there's just no attempt at humanizing the people in the city. And you'd say, well, cities should be humanized by default, but they were dehumanized. And I think that we're cultured to not humanize casualties. We're given casualties with reverence and respect as if they're natural disasters, even though they're never natural disasters. So when Gaussian and Ramirez nuked Valua, I literally had no fucking idea why they nuked Valua. They have no clear character motivations. And it's not like a Kefka thing, because Gaussian's from the military. He should have a clear character arc. There's a reason why he's in the military, because that's how military works. So I can have my guesses, right? I could say they were they were traumatized by the corruption of Valua, or they looked at the history of like what the Sylvites did and decided like they need to have the power instead of Sylvites. But neither of them express anything like that. I don't have the slightest clue why they did a nuke. I don't know why an entire nation of people were killed, most of them poor. I just have my guesses.
Yeah, well, I mean, the stated reason that they give is it's a show of force. We need to prove that we are willing to use this weapon.
But why?
Well, yeah, quite.
Why did they acquire the weapon?
There's no one else that... why they acquire the weapon is because they want to reshape society in their image, I think, or some.
But why? Like, why? What radicalized them?
I mean, this is not a game that has a clear idea about human psychology. And
Definitely.
It's just saying they're just evil.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm okay with that normally, but they nuked a fucking country, and if you're gonna bring up the nukes, there needs to be a comprehensible, coherent reason for it.
Yes. No, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that like there is textual statement of motivation. It's just a bad textual statement of motivation. It doesn't make any sense.
I should say that we know the what. We know what their motivation is. We don't know why. We don't know why they're motivated to do this. And that frustrated me actually the most, because I am desensitized to casual racism in JRPGs, which is, it's not a good statement, but that's just how it comes down to. But it was that like marginalization of people, and then them using pretty much just chips and playing cards in this silly war, believing in yourself kind of neurotypical bullshit where they can just nuke a country and then you can beat them and then everyone's happy. And it's just like, it's not a good presentation or interrogation of weapons of mass destruction, which is unprecedented for JRPG. Usually they're good at that.
Yeah. So, a couple of things. What was the first one? Second one was just on the motivations point. So there is a retcon of this that was not in the Dreamcast version, but is in the GameCube version, which is the Moonfish side quest. What that actually unlocks are, apart from a bunch of treasure rewards, is some backstory, basically, because the doctor that you meet as part of that quest,
of course,
was friends with Ramirez and was Galcian's personal physician, I think. No, that's right. He was Galcian's predecessor, like the good admiral before Galcian, I think. And if you get all the Moonfish, you get the full backstory that kind of fills this out, and it's not very good. It's very formulaic, as you would expect from a retcon backstory for a game this formulaic. And it basically reinforces everything that you'd think. It's like, they became disgusted with human greed and decided that human beings needed to all be unified and dominated and something or other.
Yeah, that's very weak, but I think it's voluminous that it's not even in the game's text. It's just there somewhere.
Yeah. And that's what the other thing was. The game wants to throw around violence in the way that like a Dragon Ball throws around spectacular violence.
Yes.
But it doesn't want to have, I don't know, somehow it can't keep it contained in the superficial way that a Dragon Ball or like so Bleach does this. I know Bleach better than Dragon Ball. There are these cataclysmic duels between characters, but they only ever affect the characters and then everybody survives anyway.
Yeah.
Like I read years and years of Bleach archives and one character died in the whole thing. And like Skies wants to have that. And you see it a bit, like DeLoco survives the complete destruction of his airship
but
3
times.
But
I think he dies. He doesn't die? He seems like he dies the last time.
Yeah, he
definitely dies the last time. He definitely dies the last time. And the game actually goes out of its way to tell you, this time we're actually killing him.
And only the villains die, and they just die because they're the villains, but...
Yeah, but then Vigoro doesn't die.
No.
But
Vigoro's actually humanized despite being a fucking rapist, but okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Belleza, she only dies because she has to have the tragic redemption moment. Likewise, Gregorio. Galcian and Ramirez die because you have to kill them because plot. And then Alfonso actually does die because he dies when Valia is...
He dies in the nuke.
But, like, the reason that this game ends up killing lots and lots of people where a Dragon Ball doesn't is because it wants the iconography of war in there.
Yep.
Whereas these other things are all duels. The duels can be completely absurd and cataclysmic, but they're contained to a duel. There's only 2 bodies that are involved. Whereas this one, it wants to have that structure, but it wants to do it while bathing in this aesthetic of basically 19th and 20th century Europe.
So another property that has World War II hagiography that is also crypto-reactionary is Space Battleship Yamato, but at no point in the fiction of Yamato is any of the characters excited about violence and warfare. Actually, every adaptation of Yamato, they're all really maudlin and torn that they have to fight, and they're like, why are humans like this sort of thing? And Skies of Arcadia has the same hagiography of World War II, and they're gung-ho and they're fucking amped to blow each other up, and it's just like, I don't like it. I just dissociate really bad. I hate war. I just hate war, and that's like a deal breaker for me.
That's fair. I definitely absorbed some of the kind of European history hagiography of war growing up, and that carries over into why I like this. I'm compelled by this game, which reflects poorly on my character, obviously. But
I mean, I have my problematic vices, but war is not one of them.
It's fair. I mean,
I think Skies is neurotypical, pro-colonial, reactionary, and condescending, and that's just my final take on it.
It's fair. I mean, I'm not going to dispute that.
What questions we got left?
Okay, so basically we have 2 more. Another one from Proxy. They ask, do you believe the ship battles were necessary or unnecessary overall, and what would you do to improve the flow of them?
They're necessary, actually.
They're absolutely essential to this game being what it is, which, it's a terrible thing for it to be, but they're essential. What would I do to improve them? So, a thing I would definitely do to improve them is have, in each turn, your move and the enemy move go off at the same time, like in the same animation slot, because that at least gives you some of the kind of exchanging broadsides feel that combat in this game is supposed to have.
And also cuts the animation time in half.
Cuts the animation time in half, and it would make fucking evasive maneuvers make sense.
Because the green orb protects me. That's not
I like when the Hydra does evasive maneuver when it can't fucking move.
Yeah. Or when one of the Gigases does it.
Yeah.
Like, you are literally a giant god statue. Why are you trying to evade?
Zillos, please stop trying to avoid. You're not actually moving. You're the size of a small moon.
The literal Death Star pulling evasive action.
This game has the literal Death Star and literal Sephiroth in it. So, but I think, honestly, Xenogears did these better just by making them. It still comes down to, did you buy the right things? But it's more like you can actually screw up. They're battles of attrition, and you have to like actually input things correctly. Where the ship in Skies of Arcadia, you can't mess up after the first couple ship battles. You just have to play it, and you'll probably win.
Yeah, the only ship battles where there's a serious risk of dying are it's the first Gigas fight,
which is the wrong way of balancing it.
It's the only Gigas that does a compellingly godlike quantity of damage to you relative to your HP pool.
Fucking the airship animations are always just like apocalyptic on this tiny ship or this large ship, and it does like 400 damage. I have 28,000. What are you fucking doing?
That one Gigas that just like steps on you and then crushes your whole ship, and it's like 3k damage. And you're just like,
yeah, it's just...
I literally got stomped into the forest floor, and it was 10% health.
The Death Star fired its laser at me. Oh, it did 5K.
Star nuked me. I'm okay though.
Yeah. So the other thing that needs changing in the ship battles is the balance. But
or the animations, because you could change that just as easy too.
Yeah. I mean, if Becky's suggestion just sped up the ship battles, then I'm okay if them just falling over, because Skies Arcadia is a game about where the heroes just win by mandate. So
yeah, I mean the thing with the ship battles is that they aren't really a JRPG combat system. They are like the set piece battles, the major battles in Suikoden.
Yeah,
they're playing the same role in the story. They're entirely narrative events, and they might just as well be that heavily scripted. But
they
there's
are
all these
not.
Bells and whistles on them because, I don't know, they didn't really understand what they were doing.
If they were more plotty too, they could justify the length if the characters yelled at each other all the time. Like the Belisa fight came the closest, and I thought they were going to be more like that, and they weren't like that.
And also, stop making them fly in circles in front of the fucking Grand Fortress door, you fucking dinguses.
Yeah.
I need to charge my SP for 3 turns. Whoops! Okay, I'm gonna fly around and wait. Ugh.
I mean, I would love to have like a Sky Pirate game that had good kind of airship battles. That'd be cool. But it's a long way from Skies of Arcadia. Yeah.
If you could just tack FTL onto something, you could probably do alright.
I kind of want the same thing, but like Power Rangers thing, where so you have the 4 characters in the one ship, but instead it's
yes,
that's what I want.
That is pretty good.
That's a pretty cool idea. Yeah.
So basically, just Xenogears but Voltron.
Yeah, Xenogears with Voltron.
I'd play it. That sounds quite fun.
As long as it wasn't written by fucking Masato Kato. Okay, so I think the ship battles, as they are, completely unnecessary, and basically just fill the spot of like really fucking long cutscenes.
Yeah, they could have been cutscenes.
But
I liked what the ship battles could have done. Basically, I liked the potential of it. I liked the novelty of it, and I hated them by the end of the game because you have to do like 20 of them.
And all in the fucking Delphinus. Okay, so the other question we have is from Kuragane on Twitter, who asks, well, I really enjoyed Skies of Arcadia. I wonder if the fairly ridiculous encounter rate in some phases of the game changed how you thought about its overall pacing and flow.
I personally, I couldn't navigate the world map like ever. I'm actually kind of challenged when it comes to 3D spaces. Like, I'll be in a tiny room in a game and I won't be able to find something really obvious. So Skies of Arcadia was like incredibly hard for me to navigate for a while until I until I slowly understood that this giant air wall is just literally a wall, and it's shaped in a weird way that doesn't make sense, but that's just how it works. But the encounter rate didn't help, because while I was lost, I would have to fight like 30, 20 battles. I fought more battles on the world map than I did in dungeons, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, almost certainly.
And most of it was because I just didn't know where to go, and I would have enjoyed the game probably not that much more, but I would have liked the spaces more on the world map if I just didn't fight battles. Chrono Cross is the right idea. When you're in your boat, you're in your boat, you get to be hanging out in the tropics. There's no battles.
Yeah, like, I mean, this is a difficult game to navigate. I know it quite well, but there's still like 20-minute segments of my stream where I was lost. Yeah, I'm just like, where the fuck do I go? Where am I supposed to be next? And it doesn't do a good job of signposting either. I like flying around the world map. The encounter rate only bothers me when there are 2 or 3 different kinds of enemy who are basically immune to your sweepers.
Yeah, that happens a lot though too.
When it leans into those, the encounter rate bothers me. The rest of the time, when an encounter is literally just, input all the commands for my sweepers and go, that's fine.
Yeah, but that's also in retrospect, because I didn't even have Lambda Burst on Ica until the last third, and I was like, wow, I could have had this earlier.
Yeah.
I used my Moonberries on the temp members because I wanted to see their moves, because I was interested in the characters. Except Gilder, not Gilder. But we didn't talk about Gilder, but he's like the most MRA character I've ever seen. He literally looks like a Fedora Redditor, and he acts like
he also looks like a Trigun. He looks like that.
Incredibly a Trigun.
But he's worse than a Trigun. He's like more bulky and masculine.
I don't know anything about Trigun. I just know he has the same fucking coat and stupid glasses, and he looks designed by Cosmic Star Heroine guy. Sorry. Oh no! Please don't utter that name here.
Like, I don't remember their company name, but that's the kind of okay.
The one good thing I can say about Gilder is he's got the only good voice clip in the game.
I don't remember his clips.
The one in his like first S move where he says "dance for me" is the only voice clip that sounds like the person recording it knew what they were doing. But I hate the voice acting in this game so much.
I was quite sure the voice acting was just done by the translators, because that's what it seems like.
It's possible.
Yeah, I'm glad this wasn't a fully voice acted game. Jesus,
God, it would be terrible.
I don't mind voice acting. I'm not Becky, but even that would have been a bit much.
Yeah. I mean, voice acting at this standard, you have to mind whether you like voice acting generally or not, because it's bad.
I don't know. There is a certain threshold. There's like a thin band of unacceptable. On one side is tolerable, and on the other side is funny as hell. So
Skies wasn't that funny really though either.
Yeah, it was just in that thin band, but there was also like 8 voice clips total.
Yeah, there aren't a lot. But that has the disadvantage that you hear some of them a lot.
Back to the question, relative to the dungeon size, I think the encounter rate was pretty good. Though I'm also I'm generally on the favor of higher encounter rates anyways, as long as...
Yeah.
Like, it's annoying in Skies because the battles take so long, but also the dungeons are really small. So as long as you know where to go, which half the time I didn't, it's actually appropriate to counter rate.
Except the water dungeon. Fuck that place.
I actually had I had a hard time in Deloco's dungeon because I just kept falling down, and I had a difficult time with the ice dungeon, even though it's really small. I just couldn't find the right path, and I was getting really mad because I'd walk down the bridge and have to fight a battle, then I'd walk back, have to fight a battle, then I forget where I am and have to fight a battle. Actually, forgetting where I am and having to fight a battle happened a lot, so...
I remember the ice dungeon is really large, because the first time I played it, I had that for hours and hours and hours, but now I know where to go. It's just like, oh yeah, it's like
a really straight path. They just,
basically, yeah.
They don't show you where they are.
Basically, I used a walkthrough to find dungeons, and then just lost myself in fucking podcasts and shit while I was mashing through the battles, and then was fine, generally, because the encounter rate shelled out for me, and I don't know why.
I think the real problem is like this. This isn't like true. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it's not the encounter rate that people feel pressured by in Skies. It's like just the lack of importance of the spaces. You just don't want to explore the places, so the encounter rate starts to annoy you. But the encounter rate would be fine if you had a reason to be there. Like it's less noticeable in the early game. Like when you're escaping Valua, for example, because you actually feel like you're doing something.
Yeah, the dungeons...
Yeah, that's fair.
The dungeons, basically in the last 2/3 of the game, just kind of feel like, yeah, I am being arbitrarily... I'm arbitrarily forced to go through this now, at least to me.
Yeah, I guess, so something that in terms of kind of liking the game, enjoying the game, it was probably worth mentioning. Every time I played this game, before playing it for the podcast, I was playing it in one of the common areas of a student flat with friends around to chat to and stuff, which helps. And playing it on stream with 2 or 3 or 4 people in my ear also really helps. It's a crap game to play on your own, I think.
It's even crappier to try to cram it all at once, which I ended up doing.
Yeah.
Which, it's only because Persona 5 came out. I would have had time, but I kept playing Persona 5.
I mean, I played through it pretty intensively because I knew I was going to need to get ahead because this month is absurdly busy, but I knew what I was doing, so that made it a lot better as well.
Yeah. Unless you're really weird and also feel like emulating a GameCube, I'm going to personally not recommend you play this game, all told. It is probably not worth your time.
Yeah, that's fair. I have spent probably around 150 hours playing this game across 3, maybe 4 playthroughs.
My take on it is that it's a relic. It's interesting. I think it's only, the people who get the most out of it are people who are already really invested in the SEGA line of JRPGs. I think you could get a lot out of it that way. Otherwise, it's not going to relate to things that well, and it's just not going to be that interesting. It's just kind of a slog.
Yeah. I don't really think it's that interesting. I don't know that Sega lineage well. The only other Dreamcast or Sega JRPG I've played is Grandia 2. But
I think fans of Phantasy Star 2 would be really frustrated because they were anti-imperialist games and now they're not. But I mean, it's interesting to see how technology, the promise or the openness of technology, kind of subverted maybe more subdued plots of earlier games. But it's also a 40-hour game if you don't know what you're doing.
I mean, it's a 40. At least. It was a 40-hour game, and I did mostly know what I was doing. Me, yeah,
it was 50 hours for me.
I beat Skies of Arcadia, and then the next day I put 11 hours into our next game. So I was just like, "Wow, I'm free! Isn't that nice?"
I actually felt a lot better after I finished it. It was when I finished Xenogears, and I was like, I guess I don't like that game at all.
But now that's done, and you have an opinion on it.
Yeah, I accidentally streamed the last 5 hours of the game in one sitting, which was not good.
I mean, that's because you're just should I stop before the final rush? No, let's do this. And then you were
I forgot how long the final rush in this context was an hour and a half. It was not very rushed.
Yeah, the final stretch.
I wanted a game where you ended up coincidentally helping Enrique's army, not being the leader of your army, where you stayed with Drachma and you just kind of do adventures. That's what I wanted, and I got something else.
Yeah, definitely.
So you wanted just Tales of Vesperia, but set in Skies of Arcadia.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Tales of Vesperia is like. Yeah, I wanted some kind of comfy get the crystals adventure game, not some clusterfuck of we are gonna do a world war and
we're gonna do a 9-ship world war.
Do a colonialism.
Yeah. I think the good news is that we're moving on to that next.
Fuck.
Oh yeah. That's what Rogue Galaxy is.
Yep.
I mean, Rogue Galaxy genuinely is structurally not capable of some of the most problematic things about Skies, even though it's got its own racist moments.
And also, it's just dumb. It's so dumb.
I mean, this game is dumb, but Rogue Galaxy is dumb in a much more entertaining way.
I mean, yeah,
this is naive. Rogue Galaxy is dumb. Okay, thank you for joining us for this episode of TGC. As we've been talking about, next month we're capping off our Sky Pirate doubleheader with Rogue Galaxy, a level 5 game for the PS2 starring Jaster Rogue, a nobody who gets drafted into a space pirate crew. If you don't have a PS2, you can pick up a copy on PS4, for PSN. I said those words backwards. For PS4 on PSN for $15 or roughly your regional equivalent. After that, we'll be doing something a little special. We will all be participating in the Final Fantasy V 4-Job Fiesta. This is a special challenge run of sorts for Final Fantasy V, run as a charity fundraiser for Child's Play every year. We will have more details and explanations as we approach the event. You can find our work on our website, jrpgsaredead.fyi, or our Twitter at jrpgsaredead, or individually at Invisible for me, at EThePen for Becky, and at WasNotWhyNot for Leroy. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/deadgenre. Join us next time for episode 22 of Dead Genre Chronicles.